Stay with me until the end of the video so you can find out everything that's going on at Manchester City, straight from the heart of the Etihad Stadium. And if you're like us, someone who lives and breathes football and has City running through their veins, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates from the biggest club in the Premier League. The first bombshell of the week involves none other than Kevin De Bruyne. After 10 years wearing the Manchester City shirt, the midfield maestro is set to leave the club this summer. While this departure has been on the radar for a while, it still feels like a punch to the gut for the fans. With a legacy that speaks for itself, 6 Premier League titles, 1 Champions League, and a host of other trophies, De Bruyne has built a career worthy of legend in English football. But now, with his contract nearing its end and multiple options on the table, the question everyone's asking is, what's next for the Belgian? According to sources close to the player, 2 possibilities are gaining traction. On one side, Saudi Arabia has entered the picture with astronomical figures, as they've done with other high-profile names. Clubs like Neom and Al-Qadsiya have already shown interest. On the other, there's Major League Soccer in the United States, where San Diego FC had opened talks, although they're no longer actively negotiating. Even so, De Bruyne is said to be leaning towards a move to the U.S., mainly because he wants to maintain a high level of competitiveness with an eye on the 2026 World Cup. And that makes perfect sense. At 33, De Bruyne still shows he has plenty to offer on the pitch. Guardiola recently commented that the midfielder is recovering well physically and getting back into rhythm. That makes every decision from now on even more strategic. After all, it's not just about securing a good paycheck or exploring new markets, but about being ready to compete in what could be his final World Cup. The clash against Manchester United at Old Trafford could be symbolic. It would be his 22nd match against the Red Devils, equaling the number of appearances he's made against both Chelsea and Arsenal. The Manchester derby might end up being the final chapter of an epic story written across the Premier League. And the question for the fans is, who will fill the gap he leaves in the starting lineup? It's impossible to talk about De Bruyne's exit without thinking about the impact it will have on the team's backbone. The number 17 was far more than a technical player. He was a brain on the pitch. His absence will demand a surgical move in the transfer market from Manchester City. And that's where the name Florian Wirtz comes in strong. The young German, who has been one of Bayer Leverkusen's standout performers, has been on City's radar for a while. According to reports from sources close to the club, City are keen on the idea of bringing in Wirtz to fill the void left by De Bruyne. The good news for the board is that the player has yet to renew his contract with the German side, despite having an offer on the table since the beginning of the year. This stalemate has kept hope alive for both Manchester City and Bayern Munich, who are also closely monitoring the midfielder's situation. But so far, the most encouraging signs have come from the English side. Wirtz's camp is said to have indicated that a move to the Etihad is not off the cards. And with every week that passes without a signature on the new deal, the chances of a transfer only increase. For Guardiola, the priority is clear: to bring in a player who not only replaces De Bruyne but can also interpret the game in a similar way. And Wirtz, with his technical ability, positioning sense, and line-breaking capabilities, appears to be the right man at the right time. But Manchester City are not just looking abroad. Another name that has returned to the spotlight recently is Liam Delap. The 21-year-old striker, a product of City's youth academy, has been shining for Ipswich Town this season, scoring 11 goals and providing 2 assists in 29 matches. His performances have rekindled City's interest, especially as they still hold a buyback clause worth $40 million. However, Delap's return to the Etihad is far from guaranteed. That's because the player himself has not yet decided whether he wants to come back. One of the factors that could count against City is the presence of Erling Haaland, an undisputed starter in attack. Furthermore, the club have just signed Omar Marish, increasing competition for minutes on the pitch even more. According to journalist Ben Jacobs, there's a concern on Delap's side that he might become just another squad player without enough time to show his worth. And with clubs like Chelsea, Manchester United, Newcastle, RB Leipzig, and Bayer Leverkusen also interested, Delap may opt to pursue his career elsewhere. It's worth noting that Ipswich are in a tough position in the table, sitting 18th and 9 points from safety. Should relegation be confirmed, Delap's departure would become even more likely. Right now, City find themselves at a turning point. De Bruyne's exit is a watershed moment, and the decisions made now will shape the club's future in the coming years. Guardiola seems ready to begin a new phase, with fresh faces and possibly a tactical style adapted to the new players arriving. But while all the backstage movement is underway, the team continues to fight at a high level on the pitch. Despite the absence of Haaland, who's recovering from an ankle injury picked up in the FA Cup quarter-final, City remains strong. Haaland, who had already scored 30 goals this season before the injury, recently posted on social media that he's on the mend and promised to be back soon. Guardiola estimates his return in 5 to 7 weeks. With the Norwegian sidelined, other players have stepped up. Jack Grealish and Omar Marish both scored in the recent win over Leicester, showing the team still has plenty of firepower even without their star striker. And Haaland's physical presence is something even opponents recognize as a brutal advantage. In an interview with Sky Sports, Aston Villa midfielder Amadou Onana said that Haaland is the toughest opponent he's ever faced. According to him, the mix of strength, pace, and physical dominance makes City's number 9 virtually unstoppable. But City are preparing not to rely solely on Haaland. The club's planning includes new signings and young talents like Abdulkadir Kuzanov, Vitarish Chenyo, and Nico Gonzalez, alongside Marish himself. The goal is to build a versatile team with multiple attacking options, capable of adapting to adversity. And it's this transition that makes the current moment so fascinating for the fans. The end of an era with De Bruyne intersecting with the birth of a new chapter, a team being dismantled and rebuilt at the same time. And every move, every name linked, could be the beginning of another glorious phase. The fans know that replacing a player like De Bruyne isn't simple, but they also know that with Guardiola at the helm and a well-executed plan, City have everything it takes to keep competing at the highest level. With De Bruyne's imminent departure and speculation surrounding Wirtz, Liam Delap, and other names from the new generation, Manchester City enters a moment that demands almost surgical precision in its decisions. Guardiola, as a master strategist, knows that every move on the board must be aligned not only with immediate needs, but also with the long-term plan that has always been a hallmark of the club's management. And it is precisely at this point that City begins to redraw its tactical and structural identity. The absence of De Bruyne represents more than just the loss of a player. It signals the need to reshape the way the team builds and finishes its plays. For years, the number 17 was the link between midfield and attack, the architect of the most brilliant moves. Without him, Guardiola will need to explore new paths. And that's where names like Wirtz, McAtee, and even Foden come into play, with the latter potentially having his role repositioned. Florian Wirtz, should he actually arrive, will not merely be a direct replacement. He brings with him a new dynamic. Unlike De Bruyne, who dominates the central midfield with vertical passes and spatial awareness, Wirtz plays with greater positional freedom, drifting across zones and creating imbalances with short dribbles and agility. His arrival will require tactical adjustments, but it could open a new dimension for City's attack. The club's youth academy is also beginning to take on a central role. James McAtee, homegrown and currently in a developmental phase, is seen as a potential heir to the creative role. With limited minutes so far, McAtee could take on more responsibility next season, depending on the outcome of the Wirtz deal and other negotiations. Guardiola has already made it clear in past interviews that he believes in the young man's talent, but the manager also knows that the Premier League is unforgiving when the level of demand is so high. Meanwhile, the attacking sector is undergoing a quiet but strategic overhaul. The arrival of Omar Marish was no coincidence. The young forward has shown finishing instinct and mobility, traits that complement Haaland's physical style. Marish can play both alongside and in place of the Norwegian, offering the manager more options for variation. In matches where the team needs more movement and less physical imposition, Marish may be the ideal piece. With Haaland temporarily sidelined, this rotation becomes even more important. Marish, alongside Grealish and perhaps Foden, will need to step up in the coming matches, and it is in this type of scenario that City usually showcases its squad depth. When injuries occur, the group responds. But this is only possible because there is planning and trust in every player who wears the sky blue shirt. However, Haaland's recovery is already beginning to take on an epic tone of anticipation. The striker has shown signs of improvement, and the fans are anxiously awaiting his return. Social media has been flooded with messages of support following Haaland's own post with the caption, "I'll be back." The image of him on crutches and wearing a medical boot traveled the world, reminding everyone of the player's importance not just to City, but to world football. And his return could be crucial, not only for the end of the season, but also for the Club World Cup. The tournament, which will take place shortly after the end of the European calendar, is a priority for the club. And Haaland, with his goal-scoring instinct, could be the trump card that places City on the global summit. In the meantime, the dressing room is adapting to this new phase. The leadership of players like Ruben Dias, Bernardo Silva, and Kyle Walker will be vital in maintaining a competitive and focused environment. These players, who have experienced all kinds of battles on and off the pitch, will be the emotional pillars of the squad during this transition. Off the pitch, the board remains firm in executing the project. The name of Bruno Guimaraes remains on the radar, although Newcastle are unlikely to make negotiations easy. The Brazilian has a long contract and a high release clause, but his profile fits Guardiola's philosophy: versatile, combative, and intelligent. He would be a heavyweight signing to balance physical intensity with creative capability in midfield. Another name frequently mentioned behind the scenes is Dani Olmo from RB Leipzig. Though not as highly touted as Wirtz, Olmo is a versatile player with international experience and appearances for the Spanish national team. He would be an interesting addition to the squad, capable of playing in various positions and bringing sharp tactical awareness to the team. But it is Wirtz who remains in the spotlight. The player's lack of a definitive response to Leverkusen is being interpreted as a sign that the market is approaching. Guardiola, who knows the German scene well, has been keeping in touch with sources close to the club and the player. City sees this as a strategic opportunity to invest now in an elite talent before Bayern Munich closes in. A potential signing would also reinforce City's interest in keeping the squad youthful. With veterans like Gundogan departing last season and now De Bruyne on his way out, the average age of the squad is likely to drop. This not only ensures energy on the pitch, but also creates space for a long-term cycle, essential in an increasingly competitive and dynamic football landscape. At the same time, City fans are watching every step with keen interest. It's a delicate moment. The excitement over potential signings is mixed with early nostalgia for De Bruyne. And this creates an emotional atmosphere that could be decisive in shaping the relationship between fans and squad in the upcoming season. The departure of an icon always leaves a mark, but it also opens the door to new heroes. Manchester City now stands at this crossroads. Preserve its winning DNA while allowing the next generation to write its own story. While the board moves behind the scenes and the squad adapts to the absence of key players, Manchester City also needs to look inward and assess how these changes align with the legacy that has been built since Pep Guardiola's arrival. And it is at this point that the Spanish manager becomes even more central to the equation. Guardiola, who transformed the tactical culture of the club and took City to the top of Europe, now faces a new challenge: to build a refreshed team without losing the identity he has cemented over the years. Kevin De Bruyne's departure is not merely the loss of an irreplaceable player. It is the first domino to fall, which could trigger an even greater overhaul. The upcoming transfer window will not be like the previous ones. City knows it must act with precision, balancing investment in established names with trust in emerging talents. Players like Phil Foden, who already hold star status, may be required to take on new responsibilities. Foden, for example, has been deployed in various roles, and there is growing expectation that he could evolve even further in a more central position, occupying spaces that once belonged to De Bruyne. At the same time, the coaching staff is closely monitoring the squad's physical condition. Haaland, being sidelined for several weeks, forces tactical adjustments. And even with trust in names like Marish and Grealish, Guardiola must avoid the risk of overloading players during decisive stages of the season. This reignites the debate around squad depth, especially when the team is competing on multiple fronts. In this context, the role of the dressing room leaders becomes even more valuable. Kyle Walker, Ruben Dias, Ederson, and Bernardo Silva. These names are pillars sustaining the internal environment. With experience accumulated from domestic and international triumphs, they are references for the younger players and new arrivals. They are the ones who maintain stability in moments when external pressure intensifies and decisions must be made with composure. Meanwhile, Florian Wirtz's name continues to gain traction. The Leverkusen midfielder represents far more than a mere signing. He is a symbol of a new generation, a player who could reshape the way City attacks. His movement between the lines, command of tight spaces, and ability to make decisive plays at key moments make him a strategic investment. It's no coincidence that other European giants are circling. But City, with its solid project and renewed ambition, believes it can convince the player. And that persuasion goes beyond financial figures. It involves showing the athlete that he will be part of a long-term project, one where he'll have a leading role in a team that plays the most admired football in Europe. Guardiola has already proven on numerous occasions that he knows how to develop young talents. The case of Julian Alvarez, for example, is a model of how the manager can polish raw potential into gold. At the same time, City's board must deal with financial balance. Although the club holds significant spending power, financial fair play regulations demand caution. This means that new signings may be dependent on the departure of other players. Names like Calvin Phillips, João Cancelo, and Aymeric Laporte, who have either seen their minutes reduced or left on loan, could be permanently sold to free up squad space and budget room. Another factor weighing on the club's decisions is the evolution of its academy. With talents emerging from the youth ranks, City must decide whether to heavily invest in players like Wirtz and Guimaraes, or to give opportunities to homegrown prospects. It's a delicate equation, but one Guardiola and his technical staff have handled with intelligence. In recent years, the club has introduced names like McAtee, Oscar Bob, and Rico Lewis, all of whom have shown potential to integrate into the first team. As the club looks ahead, supporters experience a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. De Bruyne's farewell, although painful, is also a moment to celebrate. It marks 10 years of commitment, trophies, and unforgettable moments. He became the symbol of a dominant city, respected and feared across Europe. His departure closes one chapter but opens another, and the choice of his next destination also fuels collective imagination. A potential move to Major League Soccer is not seen in a negative light. In the United States, De Bruyne would have the freedom to play at a high level without the intense pressure of the Premier League. Moreover, MLS has increasingly become an attractive destination for stars in the twilight of their careers, offering packed stadiums, top-tier facilities, and ambitious projects. San Diego FC, although no longer actively negotiating, was one of the interested clubs. And even with other offers on the table, from Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Argentina, North American football seems to appeal to the Belgian. A $6.2 million per year contract would place him among the highest-paid players in the league, which also factors into the decision. But there is an even more important element: the proximity of the 2026 World Cup, which will be held in North America. Playing in the United States could ease his adaptation to the tournament environment and allow him to maintain proper preparation. Even at 33, De Bruyne wants to compete at the highest level for Belgium, and for that, he needs to be physically sharp and in match rhythm. As his future is defined, Manchester City is working to fill the void he will leave, and it won't be easy. Replacing a player like De Bruyne goes far beyond signing a new midfielder. It's about maintaining the same level of creativity, intensity, and presence on the pitch. That's why the club is evaluating different profiles with complementary characteristics. The idea isn't to find a new De Bruyne, but to create a new dynamic that preserves the team's high standard. Amidst so many key decisions, another dilemma emerges: the return of Liam Delap. With a $40 million buyback clause, the striker, a City Academy product, has drawn attention with his performances for Ipswich Town. With 11 goals and 2 assists in 29 matches, his numbers show consistency and development. But the scenario isn't straightforward. With Haaland, the undisputed starter, and Marish gaining ground, Delap knows he might once again face a lack of opportunities, the same reason he sought playing time away from the Etihad. Chelsea, Manchester United, Newcastle, RB Leipzig, and Bayer Leverkusen are all closely monitoring the situation, and the player may opt to continue growing in an environment where he is a central figure. For City, Delap's return would be an interesting move if there is clarity regarding his role in the squad. Bringing back a young talent just to sit on the bench could be a waste, especially if he is on the rise. That's why Guardiola and his coaching staff are analyzing it carefully. And the player himself, now more mature, also seems willing to consider all options before making a decision. Meanwhile, the fans are watching everything with keen eyes. Every detail matters, every name mentioned, every statement from Guardiola. Because now more than ever, City is entering a period of renewal, not out of necessity, but by choice. And that makes all the difference. The club isn't being forced to change. It is reinventing itself by conviction, with planning and ambition. This new phase promises to be just as exciting as the last, and with the right names, City can remain at the top. Now with new protagonists, fresh challenges, and the same winning mentality as always. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion matters and helps us keep creating content for those who truly live and breathe City. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like to support our work. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell so you don't miss any updates, and join this community that loves Manchester City as much as you do. We'll see you in the next video with more news straight from the Etihad. Thanks for sticking with us till the end, and until next time.